In my early years in the Jewish Center, my president came over to me after about a year. He said, and again, I'm just setting the stage, the Pnei of New York Jewry is sitting there in front of me at the Jewish Center on West 86th Street. It's a very fancy shul. I'm like dripping under the top hat that I wore every Shabbos with the striped pants. And it's very high church, formidable. And I'm a 30-year-old pisher who's showing up after Isaac Bernstein and Norman Lamb. And right behind me here is sitting Rabbi Leo Young. And Dr. Lamb is in the shul. He's in front of me, 12 rows in front. And I'm quaking in my boots. And after a year, the president said, "You're a sweet guy, but you basically don't know how to give a sermon." I got the services of a speech teacher. I think it was $60 an hour then. So I kicked in 30, the shul kicked in 30 for 6 months, once a week. And it made a world of a difference for me.
Today, you're in for a real treat. In this episode, I sit down with Rabbi Dr. J.J. Schacter, the elder statesman of the synagogue sermon. Early into my podcast, I lost track of how many times Rabbi Schacter's name came up in conversation, whether it's classes at YU, or his annual Yarchei Kallah seminars, or just being available for one-to-one advice. So many of my guests have cited Rabbi Schacter as having been an invaluable influence, mentor, and confidant to them in their rabbinic careers. Today's episode is jam-packed with actionable advice, timeless techniques, and legendary sermon lore. We cover how to grab your audience's attention in the first 30 seconds.
You have to make it interesting to them, because if you don't make it interesting within the first 30 seconds, so they're out of here, and you've lost them for the rest of the Drasha.
What you can do to be a more interesting speaker.
And I would find the most off-the-wall magazines. I would find magazines for black men that for me were not the world that I lived in. I'd find architecture magazines. I'd find engineering magazines. I didn't understand the word.
The one thing that will make crafting your drasha easier and better than anything else.
You are doing yourself an incredible disservice. You are hurting yourself. You are damaging yourself if you're the only one who is tackling this by yourself on your own.
How to command the respect of your congregation through your drasha.
They appreciate that you respect them by not just blowing this off, but by coming in having given it some thought.
And the one mindset that will allow you to let negative feedback roll off your back without taking it personally.
No, so when things are great, just keep an even keel. It's not like, oh my God, whoa, I am hot stuff, whoa. And when things are terrible, don't beat up on yourself. You go home and you're crying to your wife, and then she's crying and can't look at this balabus in the face. Just let it go. Understand. I hate to break it to you, Rabbi. It's not all about me.
I learned so much from my interview with Rabbi Dr. J.J. Schacter, and I'm sure you will too. So now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Rabbi J.J. Schacter.
Shalom Aleichem.
Aleichem shalom. Aleichem shalom.
Thank you so much for making the time for this.
Okay. Yeah, how can I help you?
What, in your opinion, what's the goal of a drasha? What's the goal of a sermon? And has it changed over the years?
Well, I'm not that old, so it's hard for me to know if it's changed, quote, over the years. I would say for me, the goal of a sermon is twofold. Number one, it's to educate, and number two, it's to inspire. I think that the rabbis need to understand, as I'm sure they do, that for the vast majority of people who are sitting there on Shabbos morning, hopefully listening to them, this is their one opportunity a week to hear some Torah. They're not coming to the Tuesday night Gemara shir. They're not coming to the Wednesday afternoon Chumash shir. Vast majority of the women are not coming to the Monday morning Nach shir. So 95% of the people sitting there, this is their one bite at this apple. And as a result, if we are to be a Melamed Torah L'Am Yisrael, so we have to teach Torah. So we don't just circle around. We don't just repeat some editorial. We have to teach Torah, and we have to teach Torah in a compelling way so that people should listen and people should remember. I tell my students all the time, we'll come back to this, that you have to make it interesting to them, because if you don't make it interesting within the first 30 seconds, So they're out of here, and you've lost them for the rest of the drasha. So they're going to dig into their bag or to their talazekel, and they're going to pull out the sacks or lead tag or close their eyes, and they're gone. So even though they don't hear Torah the rest of the week, and this is it, but you have to get them interested. So it has to be interesting. It has to be substantive, a kasha, a teretz, or something. And we'll talk more later, if you want, about the architectonics of the drasha. So number one, it has to educate. Hopefully, leave a little bit of a controversial question, something unattended to, so that they have what to talk about at the Shabbos table. And number two, it needs to inspire them. These people are busy all week. They drag themselves to Shul Shabbos morning. Hopefully they got there not too far after Baruch Hu, and hopefully before Chazar Sachat of Shachris. And they're not looking necessarily to be inspired. They're looking to go to the Kiddush Club and talk to their friends. But that's our job. Our job is not just to educate, but to inspire, to have them think deeply about something and maybe make a change in their lives, undertake a particular project. If the shul is pushing something, this Thanksgiving we're going to the fire station, or we're starting a new Nach Yomi. If there is a project that the shul wants to do, so it's the rabbi's job to inspire people. They can't force anybody. Those days are long, long gone. People are going to do what they want to do, and people are going to do what they want to do only if they believe that what is being offered them will benefit them. How are they going to benefit from this? What's in it for me? Now, what's in it for me could even be spiritually for me or educationally for me. It doesn't have to be financially. But I need to have a tovas hanoah from this. And so it's our job to figure out how to do that, how to give them chomer and give them inspiration. Those are the two foci of a drasha.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say about using the pulpit as a platform to discuss communal issues or political issues or any other type of thing like that?
Well, it depends what it is. A community issue of anti-Semitism that we're facing in our community. So that's important, I think, to bring that to people's attention in a way different than what they already know about it. And the goal is not to scare them, but to pick them up. The whole goal is here, when I mean inspire, I mean to elevate, to scare them, to tell them about how terrible things are. But here's what we're going to do. Here's the way I'd like you to think about this. Here's a plan. But it can't just be, let's talk about the situation in our community. Here's a plan and sit down. But it has to be contextualized within the Torah. It has to be a piece of Torah. Politics is very different. I think it's a bad mistake for rabbis to do a deep dive into politics, because inevitably there are people in their shul on different sides of this issue. And at the end of the day, they end up alienating a lot of people. The ones who agree with them are much less consequential in this context than those who disagree with them, because those who disagree with them will do so with great vehemence. And, Mirza Hashem, he'll get his contract renewed, but it's not wise to do. And then the question is there an inspiration here? Is there a piece of Torah here? It has to check two boxes. So you're going to tell me who to vote for in the presidential election is ridiculous. Or even in a local election is ridiculous. It's probably against the law. I believe it is, to use the pulpit to promote certain political perspectives. But you have to have seichel too, and frame your perspective in a way that people will not be threatened by it, will see how Torah speaks to contemporary issues, and will be inspired to be better human beings and better Jews.
Mm-hmm. Is it important to have a takeaway at the end, a specific message or a specific action point, a call to action, something like that?
I think it's always better because you want the sermon to outlast the hopefully not more than 17 minutes that you delivered it. And what will motivate them to think about this afterwards? So I think something forward, something future, something okay now is going to be helpful pedagogically, and I think ultimately also in terms of what the goal of the drasha is in terms of a particular action.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about the architecture that you described. I've heard many people reference the H structure, and
Yeah.
I'm curious about that, the origin of that, and maybe some other models.
I'm not even sure at this point. I've been at this for a very long time. I don't remember how this began, but the basic yesod is a drasha needs to be like the capital letter H, not like the lowercase h, because the din in the capital letter H, and I know nobody does this anymore because nobody writes. You just click a button and H pops up on your computer. So I am clearly dating myself. But so let's imagine you have a pen in your hand and you have a piece of paper. Let's just imagine. So the way you make a capital H is you make a line, a vertical line, and you pick up the pen or the pencil, and then you make a parallel vertical line. And then there's the line that is mechaber between the left line and the right line. So the point is that the nimshal is that you begin a drasha with an opener by saying something, and saying something interesting, unique. Dr. Norman Lamb told me when I came to the Jewish Center, I was a rabbi in the Upper West Side for almost 20 years. I had been a rabbi in Sharon, Massachusetts, in the Young Israel of Sharon, when I first started. And then in 1981, when I was 30 years old, I became the rabbi of the Jewish Center in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. My immediate predecessor was Rabbi Isaac Bernstein, Zichrono Livracha, who was just a master, mesmerizing orator. And his drashos, number of them are available in shiurim, primarily his chumash shiurim are available online. You can hear him, so you can get a sense of the drama. And then before him was Dr. Norman Lamb. And I came in as a 30-year-old kid, and I was really struggling with my drashos at that point, even had I not followed two of the most unbelievable orators of the century. And I sat down with Dr. Lamb. He was very gracious to me, and he gave me a few yesodos. He said to me, I remember the following. He said, your congregation will give you 25 seconds to interest them when you start a drasha. If they like you, they'll give you 35 seconds, which means that you have to say something happy, crazy, challenging, interesting, off a wall. I used to travel a lot in the early decade when I was at the Jewish Center, and I would travel on Eastern Airlines. I'm also dating myself. From LaGuardia, there was a thing called Eastern Airlines. They had a shuttle. And when you walk
in, they give the kids a pin, a little pin with the wings on them. I remember.
Pin with the wings.
Yeah.
You walked into the Marine Air Terminal, I think, where the Eastern Airlines shuttle was. There was a whole list of magazines, a whole piles of magazines for free that you would scoop up as you went up the ramp to go towards the gates. And I would regularly find the most off-the-wall magazines. I would find magazines for Black men that, for me, were not the world that I lived in. I'd find architecture magazines. I'd find engineering magazines. I didn't understand the word. And that's how I would begin a drasha. I would say this. I would start by saying, this past week, I happened to be reading Architectural Digest, and I came, and all of a sudden, everybody who's like this, their heads are down, all of a sudden they open up their eyes, and whoa. The rabbi's reading ebony magazine, Ma Inyan Shmita Eitzel Har Sinai. Like, how did that happen? And that's what I would do. Or I would tell them a story. And it would have to be like a pithy story, not an Eisgeschleppte story. I'd have to find something to get them involved, to get them in. And I would tell a story. I would talk about a magazine article that I read, and then I would stop. And then I will never say, huge aside, the idea reflected in this article is found in an Orach Chaim in today's Parsha. Never. That's absolute Issa d'Oraisa. I would quote the article, and then I would say, stop, pause, 2-3 seconds. It felt like 20, and say, there's something really extraordinary that we find in the third pasuk that we heard a couple of minutes ago, and go into a piece of Torah, and absolutely not at all make a connection between the second part and the first part.
Complete non sequitur.
Complete, unrelated, complete.
Yeah.
And I could see the Balabatim trying to figure out how is he going to get from here to there? Like, what does this have to do? And I would try to set it up in a way that it is utterly not obvious. What's my goal? My goal is now I have them. Now they're listening. Now they're trying to figure this out. Now they're trying to understand, how's he going to crawl out of this? Like, he's not going to just drop that and done. And then, see, at the end, somehow he's going to have to pull it together.
So the story, the opener is the first line of the H.
The opener is the first line of the H. Then I pick up the pen, I stop, I pause for 2 seconds, and I say something about the Parsha, or it doesn't necessarily have to be about the Parsha, some piece of Torah that I try to frame and present in as exciting, interesting, unique way. Ask a question. I'm always in favor of asking a question and giving an answer, and giving an answer that is sort of a foil. And then, that's really not the answer I want to give, but give the answer I want to give. That's the second line, the second vertical line. And then wait till as long as possible until I draw the line across and put the two of them together. I would try to do it within 2 minutes of the end of the drasha, and then wrap it up and sit down and Yiskadal v'Yiskadash. So the goal here is to interest them, to get them interested, to keep their interest, maintain their interest, teach them something, inspire them, and motivate them to take the drasha and bring it home, either literally or figuratively.
Yeah. And that model, you said you learned that from Rabbi?
I learned from him the notion of, I give you 25 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
That, and if I like you, I'll give you 28 seconds. But I don't remember hearing this mahalach about the two parallel lines of the H, and then waiting as long as possible to relieve the tension, to keep the tension of the drasha as long as possible. At some point that you gotta wrap it up, but to do that as far in as possible into the drasha. But you need 2 minutes to bring it home. You need 2 minutes to lay it out. I don't remember hearing that from anyone else.
Yeah. How would you connect if you're going to give me for instance, how would you connect, some,
I was thinking about it, for instance, and I don't remember. It's been a very long time.
Because you said that there's not an intuitive connection.
There should not be an intuitive connection. You should try to set it up in a way that they really don't know where you're going. So I don't really have a specific example. But I think it's self-evident if anybody sits down and writes a drasha that is the goal, and it's eminently doable once it's perceived of as being of value.
Got it. So what I'm curious about, and maybe you're thus one of the best people to speak to about this, is the boundaries of drush. What's an acceptable, where are the parameters? Is it something, can you say bederach drush, like you say nishab is garet, and then just say what you want? Like, where are the parameters?
So that's a good question. I think it's important to call it for what it is, and namely not to pass drush off as a pshat and a pasuk, but to acknowledge that it's a valuable addition to the homiletical literature, and they're very creative, but not pshat. And I do believe that it has its own value, even though it's not a rigorous, I would even say correct, let alone precise. It's not even a correct interpretation of a pasuk or of a Maimer Chazal. But it's very creative. My father, Zechrono Livracha, Rabbi Schacter, who was a master darshan, dafka darshan, besides being an orator, really excelled in drush. I'll give you an example, and I've used this, and I've heard him use this. He was a chairman of a panel at a rabbinic conference, and there were 3 or 4 rabbis who were supposed to speak, and inevitably the first 2 guys hog the whole thing, and then the last 2 guys are angry because the first 2 guys bled into their time, and then it's a big mess when you have a panel at a rabbinic conference. You have to really ride the herd hard. So he quoted the pasuk, "Ki sifsei kohen yishmeru das v'tori mevaksha mipiu, ki malach Hashem tzvakosu." Says the Gemara. It's a Gemara in the Chagig, I think, Moed Katan. Im domo harav l'malach Hashem tzvakos yivakesh Torah mipiu ve'im lav ad yivakesh Torah mipiu. So the Gemara posits something really, I don't know, I would say on the face of it, very, I don't know, shocking or strange, that the only way you're going to hear Torah from a Rav is if he's domeh l'malach Hashem tzvakos. So, I mean, you got to be kidding. I mean, the rabbi's a very fine man. He's a wonderful person. He may be even a shtickle learned, but you're telling me that the bar is he has to be domeh l'malach Hashem tzvakos? So my father said, as he's introducing this panel, how do you define a malach? What makes a malach a malach? Because we say in Shachris, we talk about the malach, and we say the nosim rishus zeh lo zeh lahaktish liyotzra. So a malach is someone who's nosim rishus zeh lo zeh lahaktish liyotzra. So this is what we got to do this evening. The evening, you want to be a rabbi in this panel, you have to be like a malach. It doesn't mean that you walk around and you fast for 3 months, and it doesn't mean that you're chapping malachim and you're in the heavens. It means, very simply, you have to do what you're doing, but the nosim rishus zeh lo zeh. A malach doesn't hog, a malach gives rishus. And that inevitably gets a laugh, and I think it's incredibly creative. My father also said, and I've used this many times, especially when I'm the 3rd guy on the panel and the other 2 guys hog the whole thing, I get up and I say, there's a mitzvah say in the Torah that I want to be mekayim now, and that is ketziras ha'omer. Not omer with an ayin, but omer with an aleph. And that, everybody loves that. I mean, that's like, that's a way how to break the tension. Yeah. Let everybody know that the hour is late. And it's a interesting way how to call it.
Yeah.
I'll give you one more example just of an exchange that I heard you talking about drush, and why I think drush is valuable as long as you don't mistake it for pshat. So my father was older, and he used to work at YU, and I went to visit him once, and we're walking outside, and he had a cane. He was already elderly, needed a cane. So Dr. Norman Lamb was then the president of YU, was walking towards him, and they were friendly for 50 years. So Dr. Lamb says to my father, Reb Herschel, Lo yeyaseh kain bimkaimenu. And in a second, my father said, in a nanosecond, He said, Reb Nachum, al kain nekave lecha. Now that's genius.
Yeah.
Dr. Lamb said, Lo yeyasa kain. He used that before. But I don't know if my father ever heard that before, but in a nanosecond, he came right back at him. Now, is that pshat? Obviously, it's not pshat. Is that like humongously clever? It's massively clever. Is it valuable? It is amazingly valuable because it helps convey a certain perspective through the lens of a pasuk, of a Maimer Chazal, of a part of davening. So it's rooted in our tradition, and it speaks to a particular life circumstance.
Yeah.
There are many examples. So yes, I think Drush does have a place, but you have to name it. And once you name it, unless it's like utterly crazy, then you're good to go.
Hey there, fellow podcast listeners. There's a secret that great public speakers know. Did you know there's a method for cutting straight through to an audience's heart, grabbing their attention and holding it, and making a memorable impact with your presentation? The best speakers in the world utilize it, and now you can too, every time you get up to speak. Download your free Maggid method of public speaking template at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. The Maggid method will teach you how to find your authentic voice, craft meaningful presentations, manage people's attention, and build unbreakable bonds with your audience. Go to maggidmethod.com and download your free copy now. Now let's get back to the program.
Yeah. What do you think about jokes, using jokes to open?
I think if it's a good joke and it is not long and it's not offensive, yeah, sure, go for it. Just don't sit down after the joke. And then you have to remember that you can't use that joke for the next 5 years. You see, a drasha you could use 3 years later, because first of all, you forgot it. And if you forgot, if you said it, then you know Kal v'chomer the Balabatim forgot. But the joke, they're never going to forget the joke. So if you wanna blow the joke, make sure you're doing it at a time when you get the bang for the buck of the joke, because once you let it out, it's gone for the next 5 years.
Well, what do you think is the try to rephrase this? How much emphasis should there be on a rabbi being machadish, presenting an original thought versus?
I don't think so. I don't think the rabbi has to present an original thought. First of all, it's pretty impossible to present an original thought on a regular basis. Remember that this is not the only thing the rabbi does all week. The rabbi does a lot of things, and obviously a drasha has to be very important. When I went to yeshivas when I was younger. I went to the yeshiva of Philadelphia for 5 years. I learned in the Mir in Yerushalayim. My smicha is from Torah V'das. So I had this yeshivish disdain for drashas. Give me a shir, give me something, And then I became a rabbi, and I realized immediately that the sermon is critically important. And you can't just think of what you're going to say walking from your house to shul on Shabbos morning, but you have to really think about it. Dr. Lamb told me he started thinking about next Shabbos on Motzei Shabbos. When he finished this one, he started thinking about the next one. So that's a bit of a guzma. I give myself a break. But by Wednesday, I am good to go. By Wednesday, Wednesday is L'chun Ranana. Wednesday is Shabbos is coming. So when I say L'chun Ranana on the Yom, on Wednesday morning, I start to sweat because, in a couple of days, I'm going to say L'chun Ranana, and I better have the drasha worked out by the next time I say L'chun Ranana. So I would call my chavrusa, huge yesod. Every single darshan rabbi needs a chavrusa. You are doing yourself an incredible disservice. You are hurting yourself. You are damaging yourself if you're the only one who is tackling this by yourself on your own. You need someone else. You need someone else who thinks the way you do, because drashas are obviously very personal and idiosyncratic. You need someone else who has the kind of balabatim that you do, because, in the Agudas Yisrael of Passaic is a different drasha than the Riverdale Jewish Center. So they're all great and wonderful, but it's just a whole different surah. So you need to find someone who shares your way of thinking and who has a similar community. And two more things, hopefully is on the other side of the country. And more importantly, doesn't have any family members in their shul who has family members in your shul. Because what's going to happen, and it happened to me, is that after Shabbos, the father calls the kid, the parents call the hi, was Shabbos. Oh my God, I heard an incredible drasha from my rabbi. You got to be kidding. I heard the exact same drasha from my rabbi. So that's not such a good thing. My sermon chavrusa forever was Rabbi Kenny Hain, who was in Beth Shalom and Lawrence. He started off across the park from me. He started off in Orach Chaim on the Upper East Side. And Avtzalachis, which means, oh my God, it was really horrible. There were people who on the first day of Yom Tov davened by him, the second day Yom Tov davened by me. And after we made the mistake once, that he did it on the first day and I did it on the second day, we made up that if we're giving the same drasha, we're going to give it at the same time.
You have to be coordinated. Yeah.
You have to coordinate it. So you have to be smart in choosing, very smart and judiciously thoughtful in choosing a sermon chavrusa. But it's yehareg va'al yavor. If anybody who's listening to this only gets this from the entire podcast, it was worth their listening. Find somebody who is a friend of yours, who you like, who you have respect for, has respect for you, thinks like you, has balabatim like you. Try to minimize the overlap, and you're good to go, and you start Wednesday. Every Wednesday afternoon, Kenny would call me, I would call Kenny. No, so what are we doing? What are we thinking about? And the drasha would then unfold on one of two ways. Either there's something going on that we have to talk about in Manhattan or in New York or in the Jewish community or in Israel or whatever, and it's on everybody's mind, and we got to talk about it. We got to say something, and then we're going to go scramble. We have to find a piece of Torah that is somehow going to align with what it is that we want to say about this. Or very often, over the course of the last 4 days, either he or I came across something really interesting, like a chap. There was a sforno with a something, with a this. However we came across it, it doesn't matter. But we found a compelling piece of Torah that we want to share. We haven't worked out all the kinks yet. We haven't worked out the H yet, but we don't have an opener yet. But we want to use this piece of Torah, and then so where are we going to hang it? A drasha is not a dvar Torah. It's another massive yesod. This is not shalashudas Torah. Shalashudas here could begin. It says in this week's parsha. If you start a sermon, it says in this week's parsha, it's a kiss of death, and they're going to pull out lead tag and sax and start snoring within 9 seconds. Gone, finished. Never start a sermon that says in this week's parsha. So you have to start with an opener, with a hook. I call it a hook. You call it a chap. You have to get them in. And then that comes from the vort. So either you begin with the issue and you back into the vort, or you begin with the vort and you find an issue, you construct an issue.
Yeah.
I will be modeh that there were times when I was really not really sure. So Kenny and I had this joke. We would tell over a Beis Ovel story. I happened to be I opened the Drasha, I happened to have been in a Beis Ovel this week, and somebody asked me, was I in a Beis Ovel this week? No. Kadosh Baruch Hu should be meichel me for saying that I was, even though I wasn't. But I needed somehow to find a story to get uncranked. So you'd make up a story. That was rare when we were, our backs were against the wall. I'm not going to throw him under the bus. I'll throw myself under the bus when my back was against the wall. to try to open with something of interest. So yeah, that's really important. Start on Wednesday, and then we would talk twice a day. Thursday twice, Friday we would hopefully by then start to finalize it, shape it up, and it still wouldn't be done until Friday night. Between the soup and the chicken, something would occur, and then by then obviously it's too late. I can't call him up, or he can't call me up. So we did the best that we could, but you need a chavrusa.
And those were similar demographics, the Jewish
There
Center.
were, yeah, modern Orthodox, tilting on the modern. Orthodox, yes, but tilting on the modern, and very similar demographics. Yeah.
And the point is to alleviate the burden, or is the point to?
It's both. It's to alleviate the burden, and you bounce off other people. You say something else that will remind them of, and it's so much better. Not just you're less nervous, but it's so much more creative when you have two people who are collaborating on this project. Each one brings to bear something else. Each one has a different set of life circumstances, and each one read something else that week or heard something else. And together it turns into something way better than what anybody could do on their own, let alone the fact that Tzoras Rabim, it's Chatzi Nechama. We both have to crawl out of this and show up with something on Shabbos morning. So let's help one another.
Did Rabbi Lam have a chavrusa?
I don't know, and I don't think so. He was amazing. He also told me, and this the world does not know, that there's a whole online Rabbi Lam Drashas. And they were used to put out the Drasha Ladoros, the 5 volumes of his drashos. But we have not only the Drashas Ladoros, we have the original. And hopefully people will go online and find it. And it's typed up in capital letters. And then he's got additions and curlicues. And he told me he did not type it before he gave it. He typed it after he gave it. That is, on Motzei Shabbos, he sat down and typed up what he said. Now, he came in with notes. He actually used notes a lot. And this is also something else that people need to at least be comfortable with. In the early years of when I was a rabbi at the Jewish Center, he was around. He was around for actually all the years, Baruch Hashem, that I was at the Jewish Center. He was the president of YU. And in my early years, because he had recently concluded being the rabbi, Rabbi Bernstein, Zechrono Levrach, my immediate predecessor, went back to England. So they would invite Rabbi Leo Young, who was still around for 5 years. He was the Rabbi Emeritus. He was 90 when I was 30, when I came to the shul. They would invite Rabbi Young to be Masada Kedushin. I was a pisher. I was a kid. I was 30. I didn't really know them. Rabbi Young was in the shul for 65 years. He buried their great-grandparents. So they had a kesher with him. And they would invite Dr. Lam to speak under the chuppah. And I would be like a Olam Goylam, standing there. Maybe if I was lucky, I'd get bracha achrita, maybe. And that lasted for a couple of years till I came into my own. And Dr. Lam, under the chuppah, would pull out index cards from his pocket, and he would hold the index cards in front of him. He wouldn't read from them, but he would glance at them. And he had, I saw them, I was standing next to him. There was a lot of writing on those index cards. So he took this responsibility very seriously and wrote his own drashas. I don't believe he had a chavrusa. He was very, very, very creative and very unusual. Anybody who reads his drashas is not standard stuff. And it's also interspersed with theology and with literature. He was very, very incredibly gifted. I'll tell you another related story that comes to my mind. And this I heard from Rabbi David Shapiro, who was the principal of the Maimonides School in Boston. This is a story for the ages. And anybody listening to this needs to know this story and should never feel guilty if they walk in with an index card. He told me that Rabbi Soloveitchik, as we know, was the founder, actually his wife, in 1937, founded the Maimonides School. And the Rav, all the years, lived in Boston, used to commute to New York to teach at Yeshiva Rabbi Dr. Used to fly out Tuesday morning, come home Thursday night, and was very invested. His wife, all the time, she was head of the school committee at Maimonides, but he was very invested. And David told me that a couple of times he used to invite the Rav to come to school on Friday to walk around the halls, to go into classrooms, to interact. He told me, I once invited him to speak to the kindergarten. So he comes in, first thing you understand, the kindergarten chairs are like here, so they had to go schlep out a chair for the Rav to sit on without him hurting himself. And then he sits down at the kindergarten and he puts his hand in his pocket and he takes out an index card. Oh my God. David, whatever chair David was sitting on, he fell off. I mean, that's unbelievable. He thought in advance.
Prepared remarks for a kindergarten class.
What am I? You understand? He's not used to talking to kindergarten kids. So he can't come in and talk about existential and ontological and axiological. I mean, it's not happening. So he's got to think in advance, like, what am I going to say that's going to work in this context? So he pulled out an index card. That's amazing. In my early years in the Rabbanis, I used to write out a lot, especially phrases, like I had alliterations. Dr. Lamb was good at this also. 5 words with C in a row, starting with the same letter. And it didn't just roll out of his head, he prepared. So number one, it makes it much better. And number two, and this also I want people to know, your audience appreciates when they recognize that you took your responsibility seriously. They appreciate that you respect them by not just blowing this off, but by coming in, having given it some thought. So that's zwei dinim. One din is it's better. The more prepared you are, the better. You don't have to obsess about it, but you should be thinking about it and working on it and kicking things around with your chavrusa. And the other thing is your audience respects you. And that's really important. You want your audience, they feel validated, they feel appreciated. You took them seriously. You didn't just throw some mishigas on a wall and hopefully it stuck. So that's really important. So to go back, I don't think he had a chavrus. I think he's very unusual. But I encourage all of my talmidim to find chavrusas. That it's absolutely essential.
Yeah, I saw some of the Tzvi Sinensky, who's the curator of the archives.
Uh-huh.
So he sent me a couple sermons where there were notes that it seemed like they were notes after having delivered the sermon from Joseph Lookstein, where he would debrief with him afterwards and I guess get his feedback. And he said, JHL like this, didn't like this. He was. It seemed like he really sought out the feedback, the constructive feedback from him.
I'm not familiar with that. I don't remember seeing those particular sermons with those annotations. But Dr. Lamb was a Talmud of Rabbi Joe Lookstein. He was an assistant to Rabbi Joe Lookstein. Before he went off to Springfield, he worked in KJ. So he had a connection with Rabbi Lookstein. And he delivered a beautiful hesped for Rabbi Joseph Lookstein.
Yeah. Rabbi Steinmetz told me that Haskell Lookstein told me that Joseph Lookstein, his father, used to pace Shabbos mornings trying to, I guess, set the sermon to really, have everything at the tip of his tongue. Mm. And he said he found it very stressful. And so Haskell did not want to do that and would read from notes. So that, does that sound accurate? Is that?
I'm not privy to what Rabbi Joseph Lookstein, how many paces he took, how many times he walked around the block before he ended up in shul. I have no idea.
Yeah,
I do know that Rabbi Lookstein read more, but there's a fine line between reading and reading. In other words, you can have it in front of you or have a lot of it in front of you. And I'm sure this is the case with Rabbi Lookstein as well. You don't sit there and read it. You at some point you untether yourself from the text, but you have the comfort knowing that it's in front of you in case you start to wander. And as time went on for me, I used to write out every word and then looked at it 2 or 3 times and never memorized it, but just to become familiar with it. And then I started writing out less, but I would write out key phrases and the order in which, and then some alliterations just to get a punch into the Drasha so my balabatim should respect me, which is a good thing for a rabbi.
Sure. Who were some of your influences and inspirations? What was it?
My father, Zechrono Livracha. My father was my major homiletical inspiration, although it was very daunting for me because he was a very powerful orator, and I was not. In my early years in the Jewish Center, my president came over to me after about a year. He said, and again, I'm just setting the stage, the Pnei of New York Jewry is sitting there in front of me at the Jewish Center on West 86th Street. It's a very fancy shul. I'm like dripping under the top hat that I wore every Shabbos with the striped pants. And it's very high church, formidable. And I'm a 30-year-old pisher who's showing up after Isaac Bernstein and Norman Lamb. And right behind me here is sitting Rabbi Leo Young. And Dr. Lamb is in the shul. He's in front of me, 12 rows in front. And I'm quaking in my boots. And after a year, the president said, "You're a sweet guy, but you basically don't know how to give a sermon." And the shul and I went 50-50. And I got the services of a speech teacher. And I worked with a speech teacher for about 6 months. And it was very nice of the shul to kick in 50%. I think it was $60 an hour then. So I kicked in 30, the shul kicked in 30 for 6 months, once a week. And it made a world of a difference for me. And I was able to turn it around. So originally I used to write out more. Then as time went on, I wrote less. And at this point, I basically get up with almost no notes at all. Maybe I have 3 words on a piece of paper. And I'm shocked at my ability at this point to be able to pull that off, because in my life, I never imagined that I would be able to. So my father was my major role model, but it was hard because he was so formidable and I was so not, that I think part of my struggles with my sermons early on was I couldn't see myself doing what he did so well. The gap was so huge that I just wasn't even in the parsha, let alone decent. But as time went on, I gained more confidence and was able to find myself in a different place. And then Dr. Lamb, from the Torah Shabbat Peh that he shared with me, that's really it. Those are my father primarily, and Dr. Lamb a little bit when I came to the Jewish Center.
What do you think about, there seems to be a trend to share, for the rabbi to share parts of his personality, maybe his growth journey with the Kehillah, maybe in the name of authenticity or vulnerability. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm in favor of that. I think that the days where the rabbi was on a pedestal and the days where the rabbi was way up there and, Balabatim really didn't have any connection with the rabbi other than a major sort of figure in the distance, that's gone. And now, obviously, in the Haredi community, it's more that way. But in the modern Orthodox community, it's pretty much gone. And I think that it's very, very helpful for the rabbi to make himself vulnerable, make himself human. Now, obviously, Ein L'Davar Sov, doesn't mean, you share personal, intimate things that are, my grandchildren would say, TMI, Zadie, TMI. It took me a while to remember that TMI means too much information. I don't need to know that. But short of TMI, yes, I think it's actually very important and very helpful. And I have found it to be extremely useful for me in my rabbanis. And now I'm no longer a pulpit rabbi, but I do a fair amount of speaking in front of audiences, and it helps to connect me to them. they identify with me and with my message more when they see me as a human being. And I would strongly urge your listeners to seriously find ways how to do this without stepping over the line.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you also about, I had so many questions, and I know we're almost towards the end. It seems that at least in YU, homiletics and public speaking have kind of diverged. Is that they're now two separate classes? Maybe it used to be packed into one. Is that the case?
Actually, not familiar with that.
I think Rabbi Penner might have said that.
So he would know because he's the dean of Reeds. Was the dean of Reeds, so he would know. But I would be surprised. It makes no sense to me that there should be separate. Homiletics is what, just drush, and then how to speak.
I guess there's the craft of putting.
It's interesting because I think you may be right, because there are speech teachers who are not the rabbis, who are not necessarily Talmidei Chachamim. I'm not sure. I don't even know who they are. Who teach the art of speaking, not the content. So they're machalek between, let's call it the gavra and the chefza. The gavra being the speaker and the chefza being the substance. So yeah, I think that is the case. And I guess there is value. I mean, if you learn how to project, how to frame an idea, whatever that idea may be, and then you plug in, a kasha and a teretz, then yeah, I think it could be valuable. It's probably more valuable if it's possible to wrap it up in one package.
Yeah. How can a rabbi measure if his drashas are successful? What are some of the ways you can assess that?
If people refer back to them, you get your cues from your balabatim. I tell my talmidim all the time the following. I say, you're going to have balabatim who are going to come over to you after every drush and say, Rabbi, that was amazing. That was like, wow, thank you. And then you're going to have balabatim who are never going to say that to you. Or they're going to say, Rabbi, you know what? I don't know exactly what happened today, but, it was like, what you said, and I tell my talmidim that neither of them are true. In other words, you're going to have balabatim who are going to love you, and they're going to come over to you, and they're going to say everything nice about you. And it's not because you're so great. Don't think you're so great. I mean, you are great. You're wonderful. But it's because you represent something. Now I'm entering into the world of psychology. My wife is a psychoanalyst. I'm holding in the world of psychology and psychoanalysis. You represent a authority figure for them. It's really important that your audience listens to this. You represent an authority figure for them. And depending on their life's experiences with their authority figures, that will project onto you. So if they loved their father and they had a nice rabbi when they were growing up, or they had a 6th grade Mora who gave them a lollipop, so they're gonna, they're okay. So you're a continuation of that. So it's not all about you. You're nice, you're wonderful, you're 36.5% taka belongs to you. But the rest, it's, that you happen to be in the right place at the right time with the right person. More important is lehefach, that when they start dumping all over you and they start, just ignoring you, it's nothing it's not you. It's that they hated their father, or their Rebbe beat them, or God knows what. And you are now the stand-in for God in this context. So they don't know what to do with you. They can't be civil you. And so they project onto you all this chazarai that has nothing to do with you. So, as the rabbinic phrase goes, lo midufshech v'lo mi'oktzech. So when things are great, just keep an even keel. It's not like, oh my God, whoa, I am hot stuff. Whoa. And when things are terrible, don't beat up on yourself. You go home and you're crying to your wife, and then she's crying, and can't look at this balabas in the face. Just let it go. Understand. I hate to break it to you, Rabbi. It's not all about you. It's, so you're asking me how are you going to know if you gave a good drasha? And, when people refer to the drasha, not when they tell you it's great, and when they don't tell you it's great, it's not great. It's not mukhrach. That's the litmus test. The litmus test is, are they going to come? Rabbi, I remember, I just had this. I went to Houston a couple of weeks ago, and a guy in Houston said to me that I was in Boca once. You spoke in Boca, and I'll tell you what you said, like 19 years ago. I mean, I don't want to give the impression this happens all the time. It doesn't happen all the time. But that, I knew that whatever I said, and I had no idea, I forgot, I knew nothing. Then I knew that was a good rush. Then I knew that was a good rush. But if the guy came over to me right away and afterwards and said, "Oh, Rabbi, he's giving me a hug in a kiss, he's slobbering all over me, it was a godless." Yeah, okay, very sweet. That's thank you. It's better than yelling at me, but that's not really a good test.
Yeah. So maybe I'll wrap up by asking you, this is something I ask everybody, which is, if you have two specific pieces of advice, if maybe you already gave them, but two specific pieces of advice for a Rav going into a Stellar, could be public speaking related, doesn't necessarily have to be, to set him up for success. What would those two things be that you would let them in on?
First thing I would say is learn to love your balabatim. Learn to have a relationship with your balabatim. Learn to respect your balabatim. Don't look down on your balabatim. Understanding, you really need to understand, it's not us versus them. It's not like the balabas is out to bury the rabbi and you have to put up all the fences and all the armor to stave off the onslaught. They are partners with you. Many of them are partners with you. The leadership of the shul, the officers of the shul, they're your partners. And they will learn to respect you and you will treat them respectfully. So that's number one, is the way you relate to your balabatim, to go into your position recognizing and appreciating the value added that balabatim could be for you if you, assuming that you will do the right thing and treat them with respect. The second thing I would say is don't throw your children and your wife under the bus. My phrase that all my students know, all my Talmudim know, do not sacrifice your children on the altar of the Jewish community. Because rabbis do that all the time. Never assume that somebody else's child is more important than your child, and take your own children's future and commitment to Torah and to mitzvahs and to humanity and to sanity for granted. Don't take your wife for granted. Your children did not ask to be brought into this world. You brought them into this world. You have an achrayus for them. You have a bigger achrayus for them than you had for Shmerel's child who sits in the third row in your shul. You want to be osek b'tzorchei tzibur be'emunah? That's great. You want to help the Jewish people? Nothing is greater than that. But your primary responsibility is to your family. You got to be
Chayach Kodman.
Chayecha Kodman. What does the Rambam say in Hilchos Avodah Zarah? We have 2 minutes. The Rambam says in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, how many people did Avraham Avinu have a hashpah on? In Pasuk, it says in Lech Lecha, Lech Lecha me'arzcha mi'moladotecha, vayelech Avram, vayikach, he took a nefesh asher asu b'cha. How many? Did you ever wonder? It's a nefesh. When Avraham Avinu hit the road and he's with Sarah and he's got Lot and he's got his immediate entourage and he turns around, how far back does he see people? What is the nefesh? So Rashi says Avraham megayer es hanoshim, the Sarah megayer es hanashim. Okay, give me a number. We're talking kirut now, right? Give me a number. So the Rambam says in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, Perek Aleph, Halacha Gimel, At sheniskaptu elav Alafim urevavos. Alafim is thousands. Revavos is tens. It's Lashon Rabbin, not rivava. Rivavos. Tens of thousands of people. When he turned around, he couldn't see the end of the line. It was just endless. So here's my question. What happened to them? After Lech Lecha, Vayera, Chayesara told us, Vayetze, Vayishlach, Vayesher, Miketz, Vayigash, Vayechi. Where'd they go? Zilcho, nada, gunish, nothing. We never hear from them. What's the nitzchiyitz of Avram Avinu? Ki bi Yitzchak yikari lechazar. Your nitzchiyitz is Yitzchak. And it was touch and go for a while with Yitzchak, but worked out well at the end. You have one yingel, you have Yitzchak. That's your nitzchiyitz. Ki bi Yitzchak yikari lechazar. Either thousands, tens of thousands, they're very nice, very nice. They're gone. At the end of the day, doesn't notch a win for Avraham. What notches a win is your child, is your family. That's what notches the win. So you want to go and you want to make Allah from Revavos, you want to be the king of Kiruv, you want to impact and bring people in and programs. And that's great. That's really great. Never, chas v'shalom, at the expense of your own family. That's number two. That's actually number one. The other one is respected Balabatim is number two. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I hope this is what you wanted. I don't know if this is wanted, but I hope it's what you wanted, and I wish you Hatzlacha Rab.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. Learn more about the Maggid Method at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.